Hi, Robert Burris here again. Finally, it's been a while since I've actually done a video. Um, my forte here is basically doing some rather brief studies of books and offering a lot of commentary. Um, the only book that I found worthy, I've come to the place, the only book that I find worthy of rigorous study and real imperative to um, study it in totality is the Holy Bible. That's just where I'm at. Um, I spent much of my life as a um, Marxist stooge, a product of our educational system, which is something I'd be happy to go into at some length. There's free books available on the Marxist history of our public schools, including Communist Manifesto itself, which that one of the stated goals, stepping stones to the glorious or inglorious, as history has proven, communist utopias listed in the last chapter of the Communist Manifesto is so-called free public education. Well, is it really free? No, it costs a lot of money. Read your newspapers. You'll find that the public diseducators are always crying about not having enough money, and we spend billions on it. Here in the state of Iowa, it's said, in fact, that we spend as much as I believe it's about $500 million on educating and feeding and clothing and caring medically for um, illegal immigrants who don't even belong here, uh, who have not entered our country legally and really have no interest in being citizens in the way that our law defines citizens and the process to become citizens. Um, and the local Des Moines school district, I believe their budget is about $750 million a year, if I'm not mistaken. Shouldn't go off the top of my head with these things, but if I remember correctly, that's what I recall um, from past news reports and public discussions about these things. Well, anyway, one of the last videos I did, I started to kind of get in a bit to this book, which was very influential in evangelical circles, particularly in the sense of, well, I should limit that to the Billy Graham organization. In the 1970s, it kind of rocked their world, or as Donald Hogue said, blew his mind when he came into contact with this book, Limits to Growth. This book was supposedly put together by an Italian think tank, European think tank, headed by an Italian fellow. And it was produced in cooperation with a consulting firm, Potomac Associates. However, much of the data in it comes from the UN. This globe on here is very symbolic. This basically was a Malthusian attempt to promote globalism. And I read the introduction last time, and that introduction mentions that everything that this book is supposed to rest upon is more or less kind of computer modeling. It speaks of the predicament of mankind, and basically states that also calls that the problematique, and states that basically it's limited resources and overpopulation, and the world's going to be in crisis. Better do something now. Of course, that was back in 1970s, and actually we've come to the point where our population has reached the point that they predicted. Yet, I drive down the highway here in Iowa and I see pretty vast, not unlimited, but relatively vast stretches of land, farm fields, and whatnot. We're not anywhere near, to the point where, we're going to be needing Soylent Green anytime soon, living in some bubble city, overcrowded and whatnot, and having to eat people. Although the ideology here is very dystopian in this book, and I think I'm prepared today to kind of wrap this part of it up to demonstrate that this is Marxist. That if you don't know Marxism very well, you can reject that. That's fine. It's very New Age in the theosophical sense, and that I probably can't make so much of a case for that right out of this book, but definitely the Marxism it's a slam dunk. And all of this has given impetus, in fact, birthed much of the rhetoric of the environmental movement we have today in 2011, soon to be 2012, and this constant pressure and the globalist circles of taxing carbon, which is supposed to be like carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and farts, because farts have carbon in them, methane, uh, hydrocarbons, sort of, that's probably not the best way. I shouldn't tie hydrocarbons and that together, but the molecules of life, which include carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, Anyhow, I wasn't a star in chemistry, so, feel free to dismiss me on that point if you'd like. In a chapter here, but anyway, back to the book. Limits to Growth, produced with the Club of Rome and another outfit in Washington, D.C. area. And I'm looking here at page 45, chapter 11. And it's about the middle of the book. As a matter of fact, at the very center of the book, there's an interesting diagram, but I'm about to show you that diagram, but I want to, and you're not going to be able to read it in detail, but the glance of it is very interesting and telling, at least as far as I'm concerned. Chapter 11, the title of this chapter is The Limits to Exponential Growth. And in each chapter, they give an interesting little quote, from some source. Somebody that chances are the reader, is going to respect in some way, or at least going to want to lend some credence to. And it's interesting, this chapter, it says, it's a quotation out of the Bible, oddly enough. I've not checked the accuracy of it, but by memory, I think it's not really been altered. And it's Luke chapter 14, verse 28. It's out of this parable that Jesus spoke of a man, a well-off man that built a tower. says, for which of you, this is the quote, for which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first, and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? That verse is, that parable is often abused. Um, the idea is that, well, let me just tie, I'm not even going to try to explain in my own words that idea. I'd just like to tie it right back to the Tower of Babel and of the work of Nimrod, whose name is rebellion. And the idea in Genesis and that story of Nimrod is that here's a man, a leader of men, who was in rebellion against God, wanted to build a mighty tall tower, and so that he could be like the Most High. I mean, that's the gist of it. And in that story, God says, hey, we're not going to put up with this. We shall go down and confuse their language and turn their communications, pardon me, if you will, into Babel. And, I find this book to be a whole lot of babble. But anyway, so that's interesting. This has a religious connotation to it. So, I guess it ought not to be terribly surprising that Donald Hoke, this evangelical pastor, man with some influence in the Billy Graham organization, would be captivated, with this. And quotes like that are without discernment, are certainly intended to captivate. Well, anyway, so let's get to this chart. I do not want to. I've already taken 12 minutes here. Here's this chart. It's a little hard to see. Lots of. These are supposed to be loops, and the lines, the circles, if you will, the paths between. Basically, these systems are represented by the dark shapes. And this is supposed to communicate complexity. And there's some rationality to all this, but it's supposed to, I believe, rather overwhelm the reader, because basically the implication is that they built this model and that they're using this as a guide for computer programs to calculate things, and that we're all supposed to be very impressed, that somebody is looking at the big picture. And these guys saying, we got the big picture, we found out we're in a predicament, and we want to talk about it. And so there's a whole lot of talk in this book about this. This is on page 102, 103, right here in the middle, very center of the book. All right, so yeah, the readers. Oh, maybe I'll read the caption here. Figure 26. The entire world model is represented here by a flow diagram in formal system dynamics notation. Levels, or physical quantities that can be measured directly, are indicated by rectangles. Rates that influence those levels by valves. This would be an example of a valve. It's a little hard. Right here near my finger, it's kind of an odd shape. Sort of a quasi-rectangular shape with a triangle attached to it. And auxiliary variables that are influenced by the rate equations by circles. Time delays are indicated by sections within rectangles. So it's a partition rectangle. Here they're showing a rectangle cut in half with the top half being divided into 3 additional sections. Real flows of people, goods, money, etc. are shown by solid arrows and casual relationships by broken arrows. Clouds represent sources or sinks that are not important to the model behavior. So this is all has the illusion of being very scientific, and again, as far as I'm concerned, this is very much a United Nations thing. This is globalism right here, and again, it's all about a predicament. Well, where I really want to get to, as quickly as possible, is in their own words, what this is all about. Again, they started out saying we got a predicament and we want to talk about it, not really purporting to have an answer. Then, of course, Hoke, he wanted to have a big discussion in the Billy Graham organization, and they had put together these big meetings and brought people in, and they had lectures, and then they had people in their organization respond, which is something I really want to get to. There's one in particular that I think is really telling. One speaker that they brought in that should have never entered into their, personally entered into their meetings, and I think the response is pretty weak. But anyway, state of globalism. What chapter is this? Chapter... No, wait a minute. Is that chapter 11? Oh, chapter 2. Sorry about that. Chapter 2. I don't need to read this whole book, and I've not read the whole damn thing. I've read enough of it to make me sick. I've read things written about it, and I'm satisfied that those analyses are reliable. As much as I need to rely on them. Well, anyway, chapter 5, the state of global equilibrium. And they've got a quote here by Aristotle, which I've actually not even bothered to read yet. Again, to me, this is all rhetoric. I'm wanting to get to the point past a multitude of words. Most persons think that, this is Aristotle speaking in this quote, most persons think that a state, in order to be happy, ought to be large. But even if they are right, they have no idea of what is large and what a large and what a small state. To the size of states there is a limit, as there is to other things, plants, animals, implements. For none of these retain their natural power when they are too large or too small. But they either wholly lose their nature or are spoiled. Interesting. Well, Aristotle, and that was 322 BC. There's a lot Aristotle didn't really know. And what's interesting is he says something, depending upon its size, loses its nature. Well, more or less, doesn't he? Because he says, for none of these retain their natural power. Okay, natural power. That's stupid. That's just stupid. Natural power? An ant, because it's small, doesn't have power? It's ridiculous. A whale, because it's big, doesn't have power? It's just nonsensical. He's speaking in the abstract, obviously. And that's the trouble of intellectualism when it deals only in the abstract. leads to a lot of mischief. Well, anyway, that's how they start off chapter 5. Well, I want to turn to page 170 here. This is near the end of the book. You can see this being the latter part of the book. And basically, where they kind of pretended they didn't have an answer and just want to have a discussion, they start to get to the point here towards the end. I mean, it's a conclusion. And you conclude a book, if you know what you're doing at the end. So, on page 170, under this, towards the bottom of the page, there's a heading here, the equilibrium state. We are by no means the first people in man's written history to propose some sort of non-growing state for human society. A number of philosophers, economists, and biologists have discussed such a state and called it by many different names, with many different meanings. So it's kind of mystical, I guess. Well, no, they're going to pull the mask off, interestingly enough. Now that I know about Marxism, I recognize the face. We have, after much discussion, decided to call the state of constant population and capital constant, planned, measured, controlled. Those are my words. I'm just kind of underlining, if you will, what they said. Constant population capital, shown in figures 47 or 46 and 47 by the term equilibrium. Equilibrium means a state of balance or equality between opposing forces. I get a little excited here. This just really gets my dander up. Opposing forces. This is a dialectic here, and you don't understand what that means. Basically, it's a contrived, in this case, crisis, bringing together a thesis, antithesis, trying to forge a synthesis, and the synthesis they're trying to forge here is globalism, push for globalism, relinquishment of national sovereignty, and that's it. Yeah, opposing forces. I mean, this is Hegel 101 and equally Marx 101. Marx being a student of Hegel, embracing his concept of dialectic, which goes perverts actually the classical dialectic of Plato, Socrates. Anyway, we'll deal with all that later. But it's a dialectic. It's a contrived conversation based on contrived notions. It's sheep herding for sheeple. So basically, they're saying we're proposing a solution. And the discussion is frequently always stated in the terms of population and capital. It's, the development of communism, interestingly enough, proposing to make level playing field, make people equal, to build a utopia that the world would just flock to. which, basically, at least in the physical sense, rather lies in ruins, but in the spiritual sense, in the intellectual sense, is still very much alive today and is actually operating out of Washington, D.C., and are distributed in our Federal Reserve System and public schools and other formerly American institutions. Anyway, communism is alive and well, but many people would advocate that, would state that it's on the scrap heap of history, but no, it's not. But that's all about population, Malthusianism, capital. Oh my, what are we going to do? Crisis, need a revolution, blah, blah, blah. On page 175, they quote John Stuart Mill, who I wouldn't normally want to quote. Growth in the equilibrium state is the heading. In getting way too excited, too worked up. In 1857, John Stuart Mill wrote, "It is scarcely necessary to remark that a stationary condition of capital and population implies no stationary state of human improvement." In other words, what he's saying is that he wants to propose that that the outward indications of progress, meaning building, advancement of living conditions, improvement in the quality of life, that he's saying that it's scarcely necessary to remark that stationary conditions of capital and population implies no stationary state of human development. So, and this is, boy, I just want to go off on tangents, and I need to stay focused. Again, this is just rhetoric, and it does, it challenges me, to bring in what I know on various, topics, and I'm no Rhodes Scholar, obviously. But he's making a division between the material and the spiritual. And basically what he's saying is that even though we limit capital and population, that the human improvement, state of human improvement, can still advance. Oh, well, yeah. Who said it couldn't? Nobody really did. It's just that this is a real convenient way to introduce a spiritual component into this, and undoubtedly this really helps seduce old Donald Hoke and the Billy Graham organization, and apparently quite a few church folk, because again, this is late 1980s. Here we are, witnessing really the final destruction of America through strategies to bring our government into collapse through bankruptcy, basically. Yeah, you might reject that. You might as well stop watching. There's nothing here for you. Move along. Anyway, Mill continues, there would not be as much scope as ever for all kinds of mental culture and moral and social progress, as much room for improving the art of living, and much more likelihood of it being improved. Basically, the idea is to call John Stuart Mill as a witness to say that cutting back on stuff, and in this case, really, the stuff that's not been mentioned really is people. Cutting back on people. Because the idea here is that you limit, well, I mean, it is implied certainly in population. Cutting back on people. When you do that, you're going to slow the machinery of capital. But then basically the idea is here that they're trying to say is, but life will be better. Marx more or less kind of said the same thing as he's making his case for communism. The Communist Manifesto saying that essentially that the rise of capitalism had made men spiritually bankrupt, more or less, even though Marx is an atheist. He didn't really state it quite that way, but that's what he was implying, and therefore the quality of life was horrendous for the working man, and that he was reduced to repetitive labor and no longer a skilled craftsman who could take pride in what he did. And therefore, we needed a new system. Well, so basically, Marxism has turned out to be a war on humanity. And I don't mind saying that. You may not understand that, but basically, this is a war on humanity. Now, how can I say that? Again, the undercurrent here is not that really that so much as that the resources of the earth are limited. Because I really don't think that case can be made. Yes, there are problems in distribution and whatnot, but really the thing is that no, okay, well, it's a little difficult. Yeah, I need to rethink what I'm trying to say. I misspoke. The idea of limited resources, of which there is nothing that we can do anything about. Never mind that the case has really only been made through projections and mathematical models in this book, that is a real problem, or that is the problem. Okay? So there's nothing you can do about that. The idea is that the one thing you can do something about is population. And how shall that be accomplished? Who decides? Who lives and who dies? That's the question. And Marxist public stooges or public school stooges will undoubtedly think in their empty-headed way that, well, that doesn't bother me. You know, these people, they want the best, right? And, you know, come on. Where's your tinfoil hat? Where is my tinfoil hat? Well, this will have to do. Um, if you haven't seen the Marxism in this, I just don't know what else to say about it. I think these words. Well, I got one more bookmark here, and I didn't even have that bookmarked on Mel, but that's the reoccurring drumbeat here is population versus capital, aka resources. So the last quote I have here. Um, well, I guess I'll just take both of these paragraphs and we'll be done with this. Over the time that I really want to spend on this. We have repeatedly, this is page 182, the chapter heading is, well, it's still in the same chapter, the state of global equilibrium. We have repeatedly emphasized the importance of natural delays in population capital in the population capital system of the world. These delays mean, for example, that if Mexico's birth rate gradually declined from its present value to an exact replacement value by year 2000, the country's population would continue to grow until the year 2060. During that time, population would grow from about 50 million to 130 million. It seems very small. I shouldn't dwell on that. Anyway, I'll continue on. If the United States population had 2 children per family starting now, and if there were no net immigration, the population would continue to grow until the year 2037, and it would increase from 200 million to 266 million. If the world population as a whole, oh, okay, the above figures were dealing with just Mexico. The world population from as a whole reached a replacement size family by the year 2000, at which time the population, he's saying this in parentheses, at which time the population would be 5.8 billion. The delays caused by the age structure would result in a final leveling off of population at 8.2 billion. Assuming that the death rate would not rise before then, an unlikely assumption according to our models. In other words, they predict a lot of die-off, you know, that ought to be happening like right now. Well, yeah, I'm a baby boomer. I'm not getting any younger, you know. If you're a public school stooge and you're, just starting college or you're still in high school and you know, you're a diseducated punk, you're probably happy about that. Yeah. Die, geezer, die. Sure, no problem. I'm getting to it. But here's an interesting thing that the original owner of this book underlined. This is, this is crisis. Taking no action to solve these problems is equivalent to taking strong action. Every day of continued exponential growth brings the world system closer to the ultimate limits to that growth. A decision to do nothing is a decision to increase the risk of collapse. We cannot say with certainty how much longer mankind can postpone initiating deliberate control of growth before he will have lost the chance for control. Oh my. This thing could spiral out of control. Oh my goodness. We suspect, on the basis of present knowledge of the physical constraints of the planet, that the growth phase cannot continue for another 100 years. Again, because of the delays in the system. If the global society waits until those constraints are unmistakably apparent, it will have waited too long. Anyway, danger, danger, I thought that was, I wanted to wrap up with that because, again, in the introduction, it was kind of, there was a hint toward globalism. And what did I say? I said basically that this globalist system already existed in these people's minds. This is a push for globalism, a promotion of it, an infomercial, if you will. And what was that last statement? Again, because of the delays in the system, if the global society waits until those constraints are unmistakably apparent, until you actually see this thing happening, well, it will have waited too long. There you go. It's the white elephant of the Marxist globalist New World Order coming to you back, blast from the past, 1970s, 1972. And it is recognizably one of the foundation blocks for much of the evil we have in government today. Recall, what was it, last year, year before, we had the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Failure of a blowout preventer to keep the well from leaking millions of gallons, I don't know how many barrels, in the Gulf of Mexico. Pretty serious oil spill. But the gloom and doom was just the mentality of gloom and doom was just laughable. I remember on the nightly news seeing a little video clip of a woman just crying her eyes out, walking down the beach, talking about how the Gulf of Mexico had died, and she was in mourning. And there was no questioning by the media that I saw, really, and anyway, we are certainly become captive to this mentality. Yet here we are. Our population supposedly reached, what was it, 7 billion recently. And boy, we ought to be at the point where the crisis is just way out of control, Put a gun to your head, stooges. Kill yourself to save the planet. That's the idea. Don't bother having a family. God is no longer in control. He's left you without hope. That's the idea. How did that get into evangelical churches? Well, that's the whole point of looking at that book, because that's the book that Donald Hope claims blew his mind. And that's what led to this. Which deals with consultation with Theosophists, New Agers. As a matter of fact, what I want to get to next time is a parts of a speech. Yeah, obviously I'm not. We'd be here for like 5 hours if I tried to get through the whole thing, and interject my comments. Uh, you know, get the book. You can. I ordered mine off of Amazon. They're still around. Didn't pay too much for it. It's called Evangelicals Face the Future, edited by Donald E. Hoke. Um, William Carey Library, publishers, the William Carey Library. South Pasadena, California. Copyright 1978 by the Billy Graham Center, Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois. A center of New Age. Well, anyway, the speech I want to get to next time, at least parts of it. I saw it here. But for some reason I'm overlooking it. Anyway, it's by one Willis Harmon, who's a notorious theosophist. And they brought this guy in to make a speech. The other book here, kind of a partner companion piece to that one. It's called An Evangelical Agenda, and with the ominous subtitle of 1984 and Beyond. Ooh. Well, that's very interesting because to keep population in line, keep the stooges in line, make sure they abort, their babies and keep it all under control. Well, you need sort of a totalitarian system. Boy, you need Orwell. You might as well follow it like a plan. As a matter of fact, I recall in Orwell, in a section dealing essentially with the need to destroy the family, dealing with the reproduction. Okay, here it is. This is rich. It's in part 2. It's page 27. A utopian perspective on the future. Address by Dr. Willis W. Harmon. Yeah, that'll be fun. I guess I'm having too fun. I get excited. I stumble in my reading, and thanks for bearing with me.